talks with India to end the violence in Kashmir. More than 200 people have died since January in fighting between Indian troops and Kashmiri Muslims demanding independence. Ms. Bhutto's offer comes shortly before she makes an official visit to the Pakistani part of Kashmir.
The Shimla Agreement of 1972 binds India and Pakistan to a bilateral solution of the Kashmir problem. But Pakistan's Prime Minister Benazir Bhutto has been stressing on a United Nations resolution committing India to a referendum in the border state. This motion restricts Kashmiris to choosing between India and Pakistan and denies them the third option of an independent Kashmir. The VP Singh government in India has virtually rejected the demand for a plebiscite on the grounds that Pakistan has allegedly not fulfilled the preconditions for such a vote. Pakistan is yet to vacate the portion of Kashmir it occupied 42 years ago. Last week, Mr. Singh expressed disappointment at Pakistan's attitude. Mrs. Bhutto's readiness for unconditional talks therefore removes this complaint. But breaking the ice on Kashmir will be very difficult. Ashish Rai, ITN, New Delhi.
Another communist regime
being waged by Muslim separatists. Nearly 200 people are thought to have been killed. 15,000 people took to the streets today when news of another killing spread. The Indian Prime Minister has announced the appointment of a Minister for Kashmiri Affairs. The move comes after a weekend visit to the region by an all-party delegation. Separatists are reported to have refused to see them. Kashmir is sandwiched between India and Pakistan, with China and Afghanistan on its other borders. The state's been the cause of 2 wars between India and Pakistan. Part of what's considered Kashmir is under Pakistani control. The unrest has broken out in the part now under direct rule from New Delhi. The Indian government says there have been a series of elections in Kashmir which the separatists have refused to accept. Their violent opposition has made direct rule necessary. The government has cordoned off the state, imposed a curfew, and banned foreign journalists from reporting the unrest. But the BBC has obtained exclusive pictures of the struggle. Our Foreign Affairs correspondent, George Alagaya, reports.
The conflict in Kashmir is the same one that convulsed India at its birth. When the constitutional veneer of the last 40-odd years is stripped away, what's exposed is the seething tension between Hinduism and Islam. Precisely the conflict that led to the creation of Muslim Pakistan. That partition made enemies of men who'd been united in opposing the colonial legacy. Today their successors are once again on the verge of a precipice. Never before has New Delhi faced such massive or sustained opposition to its rule over Kashmir. In the past few weeks, hundreds of thousands of people have marched through Srinagar, demanding independence for Jammu and Kashmir, the only Muslim-dominated state in India. Encouraged by Rajiv Gandhi's failure at the polls and embittered by the present government's heavy-handed response to the first days of protest, Kashmiris have taken to the streets in support of the Jammu and Kashmir Liberation Front. The new government's response has been depressingly familiar: brutal suppression of the pro-independence movement. These women have just been told of the death of the head of the household. He was a simple shopkeeper, unlucky enough to be in the way when Indian troops rained bullets on a group of youths who'd been taunting them. 9 others were shot that day. New Delhi censorship makes it difficult to estimate the number of deaths over the last 3 months of upheaval. About 200 is likely, though Kashmiri sources put the figure much higher.
CRP has fired on the innocent peoples of Kashmir. 10 people have been killed.
The government decision to send the troops in has been answered with a call for a holy war. To die in this war is to be martyred for the faith, and there's no shortage of volunteers.
We want an independent Kashmir. Here everyone is ready to die. I am ready to die. Everybody, even young persons are ready to, old, young, everybody is ready to die. We can't back up this time. It's now or never. It's time to act now or never.
India accuses Pakistan of aiding the militants. They've already fought 2 wars over Kashmir. A third seems unlikely, but the trading of accusations between Benazir Bhutto and VP Singh has done little to cool the temperature. Both depend on the support of other parties, and they're coming under domestic pressure to adopt hardline positions. Bhutto is accused of failing to defend fellow Muslims with the necessary vigor. Singh has seen the Hindu fundamentalists, who oppose any compromise on Kashmir, do well in recent state elections. Kashmiri cities were reduced to rubble when India and Pakistan fought over the region in 1948. Hundreds of thousands were made homeless and just as many were killed. The UN-backed peace agreement included a call for a plebiscite in the region. 40 years on, and India has yet to implement the referendum. The UN is still there, keeping the peace between the two countries, and its officers have received over 400 petitions demanding action on the plebiscite. The JKLF has gained most from India's refusal so far to look for a political solution. It's the strongest of the 30 or so organizations that have mushroomed in the last few months. Some want unity with Pakistan, others prefer an independent state. While most have resorted to the rhetoric of the religious war, the solution will have to be a political one.
The people of the state, because of the continuous imposition of the curfew, they are being deprived of their basic essentials. That is the congregation of the Friday prayers. But at the same time, we can't say that it is exclusively a religious problem, because the origin, the essence of the problem is from the commitment of the Indian and the Pakistan government. The authentication to which stands from the Security Council resolution. And the people, they feel that they have been deprived. India is not fulfilling its promises.
Islam now promises to deliver what politics has failed to achieve. Friday prayers were banned for a month and worship has become an act of defiance. The mullah's words have gained a new resonance. With news reports censored, the Friday sermons are often the only source of information trusted by Kashmiris. And it doesn't take much to convince people that they've been cheated. Tourism, the main money earner, is at a standstill, and every day the local economy slips further into recession. Add this to decades of government neglect and corruption, and it's not hard to explain the lure of the gun. This amateur video made by the student wing of the JKLF shows viewers how to use a Kalashnikov assault rifle. Small groups gather in secret backstreet hideouts where they're recruited by the JKLF. India accuses Pakistan of arming the militants. Many of the weapons certainly do come through Pakistan, but there's little evidence so far to prove official complicity. Since the Afghan war, Pakistan's northwest frontier province is awash with guns, and it's easy enough to acquire them in the weapons bazaars. A massive demonstration led by lawyers 3 weeks ago shattered government claims that the upheaval is the work of a militant clique. Defiance has now spread across the social spectrum. The march saw the emergence of a new political movement to run in tandem with the armed JKLF. The message is clear. If New Delhi wants to fight, there are guerrillas ready to take it on. If it decides to talk, then there are politicians ready to negotiate.
The people of Kashmir firstly tried to make India to understand that the people of Kashmir have to exercise their right of self-determination, but they did not listen to them. And now it is intensified. Intensified in the sense that we have gone to arms because India has not heard the voice of the people.
Srinagar's Bone and Joint Hospital has to cope with the descent into violence. Over 40 people were being treated for bullet wounds when these pictures were taken. It'll need more than the skills of the doctors here to heal the scars left by this latest battle for Kashmir. Just months ago, Kashmir was an oasis of calm in a region of strife. Now, as government peace efforts flounder, Kashmir slips ever closer to anarchy and devastation. The clash between the state and central government in India is almost as old as the nation itself. The current flare-up in Kashmir is only the latest example. Prime Minister Vishwanath Singh promised to bring peace to the country's troubled regions when he took power. Just 3 months into office, he's learnt, as others did before him, just how intractable an issue it is.
Military forces on alert following Indian accusations that Pakistan is encouraging the separatist unrest in Kashmir. Tension between the two countries has increased after Indian news agencies reported that 7 Kashmiri militants trying to cross over into Pakistan had been shot dead by Indian border guards. Earlier, Kashmiri nationalists murdered 3 hostages they were holding in the disputed territory and bombed a crowded commuter train near Bombay. An Islamic independence group called Mujahideen Kashmir claimed responsibility. India and Pakistan have fought 2 wars over the Kashmir Valley, which was divided between them after they gained independence from Britain in 1947. Muslim separatists want Kashmir to be an independent state. Some of the pictures in this report were taken by a Kashmiri separatist organization.
VP Singh's remarks were his stiffest warning yet on the now widely discussed subject of war with Pakistan. He accused Pakistan of fomenting the violence in Kashmir, violence that's escalating at an alarming rate. Nationalist demonstrations by Muslim separatists are now a daily occurrence in and around the capital Srinagar. A curfew is in force in most parts of the state. Clashes between police and protesters have left dozens dead. The mainly Muslim population of the territory demand independence from India. They perceive a spiritual link with Muslim Pakistan, whose Prime Minister Benazir Bhutto has threatened a 1,000-year war to win Kashmir from India. She's also pledged millions of rupees to the Kashmiri militants. Pakistan denies being involved in the unrest, but insists on self-determination for Kashmiris. Indeed, both capitals will be watching each other's actions in Kashmir as the tense situation gives rise to the possibility of yet another outbreak of hostilities in the subcontinent.
Pakistan has put its military forces after yesterday's warning from India that the 2 countries are on the verge of war. The crisis has been intensified by 2 incidents: the murder of 3 hostages by militants in Kashmir and the death of 7 Kashmiris at the hands of Indian troops as they tried to cross into Pakistan. Twice before, India and Pakistan have gone to war over Kashmir, which was divided between them in 1947. Pakistan has accused India of intimidation by moving a strike force to the Rajasthan desert within 50 miles of the border.
As the body of one of the 3 men killed by the Kashmiri militants was brought home, there was widespread condemnation in India of the killing. In the Indian capital, New Delhi, protesters gathered outside the Pakistan embassy and called on the Pakistan government to end what they say is its support for violence in Kashmir. The Indian Prime Minister VP Singh has issued a stern warning to Pakistan over Kashmir and said India must be prepared for war. The Pakistan government of Benazir Bhutto criticized what it described as India's threat and said it would defend its borders. Kashmiri separatists have already accused Indian troops of atrocities on civilians and say Kashmiris must be given the opportunity to decide the future of the state.
I think the best political solution and the most peaceful solution under the circumstances would be United Nations intervention, i.e. holding a plebiscite under UN auspices, which the foundations for which have been laid down in 1949. It remains pending business for UN.
In the capital of Kashmir, Srinagar, Indian troops have begun house-to-house searches as part of a huge manhunt for the killers.
Our forces have warned his government they couldn't sustain a long conflict if war broke out against India. Both countries are under increasing diplomatic pressure to cool their dispute over Kashmir before a minor incident sparks something more serious. Both sides claim Kashmir is theirs. Pakistan currently controls about a third of the province.
Kashmir is one of the untidiest of all the legacies of the British Raj. During the scramble to independence 43 years ago, and after some dispute, Kashmir, with its Muslim majority, became part of India after partition with Pakistan. Soon after, India promised the Kashmiris a plebiscite, and they're still waiting, and the dispute continues. Both countries have gone to war twice over the territory, and this week they put their armies on alert yet again. India's Prime Minister, VP Singh, in a speech patently not designed to cool passions, called on his countrymen to prepare for war. It followed the kidnappings and killings of 3 Indians by Kashmiri Muslim militants. Caroline Lethman now reports.
The death of the hostages taken by Kashmiri separatists this week shocked the Indian government. Their bodies had been dumped unceremoniously on the streets of Srinagar, one of them even before the deadline set by the kidnappers for the release of 3 detained colleagues. The Kashmiri capital has been a city under curfew almost continuously for 3 months, the result of the latest challenge to the unity of the Indian state. During the curfews, Indian security forces hunt for insurgents and weapons, and it's alleged by the Kashmir Press Agency their searches include assaults on unarmed and innocent citizens. Between curfews, demonstrators have flooded the streets, angered by the imposition of direct rule from New Delhi last January, effectively ending the state's special status, and by the sacking of the local governor. Many Kashmiris feel they've been betrayed by the Indian government. India and Pakistan have fought for decades over Kashmir, but many ordinary Kashmiris want neither of them.
हमें कुछ नहीं चाहिए हिंदुस्तान का हमें कुछ नहीं चाहिए इसके अलावा सिर्फ इसके कि हमें फ्रीडम चाहिए बस आज़ादी चाहिए हम ना पाकिस्तान मांगते हैं ना हिंदुस्तान मांगते हैं हम सिर्फ आज़ादी मांगते हैं.
The largest separatist group is the Jammu Kashmir Liberation Front, which wants independence and is demanding a UN-supervised referendum to determine the state's future. A third of Kashmir is controlled by Pakistan, accused by New Delhi of supporting the militants, a charge denied by Islamabad. Furthermore, it's feared any concessions there could increase demands for secession in other Indian states like the Punjab. Since the crackdown 3 months ago, uncertainty and the curfews have ruined many businesses. There are claims of discrimination against Muslims and suggestions that only Hindus are given work in the vital communications industry. However, the issue is not exclusively religious, but one of Kashmiri nationalism, and calls for separate